So the plan for tonight, and we may get to part of it, is to talk about the marks of discipleship. There's 6 characteristics really that stand out. But before we do that, I put out the challenge, and I challenged everyone to read through the reading plan, and I said let's see what happens. So you had 2 weeks. I took a screenshot of
You're
mine.
keeping track of this? Or that's
No,
yours?
that's mine. I should have. I should have. I should have. I should have said yes. Yes, I am. This is 66 of 66. So
go bet then.
yeah. I've been tracking. Dave set up. The app was actually built by David, and he,
Yeah.
it was we're secretly tracking everyone. Yeah. David's now looking down on everyone.
That's why you stuck that this.
So I want to talk about this, and I have some questions because this is, and now I'm sorry if you're squirming because you didn't read it, or you didn't even attempt it. Then this is that accountability that we talked about a few weeks ago, and so welcome to that, and prepare yourself because I have another challenge for you before we're done that involves again this, but not in the same way. So you'll hear about that. Don't let me forget about it because I'm afraid I'm going to forget before we get done. Thoughts? What jumped out? Anything strike anyone?
I like the Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and He knows those who trust Him. I like that He knows us.
Okay.
I kept thinking, why did they pick this one? Out of all the verses,
Yeah,
why this
I-
one, you know?
there was a few more than a few of those, especially like Genesis. I'm like, oh, okay.
So I just wondered, like, what was their reason in picking this?
So what I know is that Matt Whitman, who created the list, is originally not the app. But he does Bible stuff on the internet is basically the way to describe what he does. And he actually has written a book, and where he went through and he's got it's a quick, and it's not even released yet. I'm hoping to get it so I can actually bring it and show you, and we might look at it in more detail at some point. But it goes through every book of the Bible, and so he's studied through and trying to find what's the 2 pages I would put in there about every book of the Bible. And so in that he kind of picked these and picked some verses or passages, and you notice when you look at the whole list that there's, as he gets into the New Testament in particular, that there's more and more. It's not like more like, how do you choose out of John? Like, you've got the 4 Gospels. How do you choose 4 verses? One from each one. And so it's his. I'm going to say that I want to see if anybody else noticed anything out of it. I'm not saying there's a hidden agenda there or anything. I just what jumped out.
That like some of the Old Testaments, they would get the first verse and the last verse a lot, like Joshua and Judges.
Yep.
Where it's like it really struck me like what I was telling Jackie what it reminded me of. Like I don't know who has like YouTube TV. Like if you're like catching up on like a sports game, you can say catch the key plays. And it'll just like slice the game up and just show you the important parts.
Yeah.
It's like someone did that to the Bible. I'm just going to slice out
the
well-known parts. And it seemed like they landed a lot on the beginning and the end of a lot of those Old Testament books.
Yeah. Now it's funny because Joshua, you mentioned Joshua, which we just studied and in Sunday school, and that one was interesting because those are really the bookends. The 2 verses are like, as for me and my house will serve the Lord. And then I think it's the very last verse, which is, and they had no king. And so everybody did what was right in his own eyes. Like literally that describes all the nation of Israel. like here's the choice before you and you just did whatever you wanted anyway. So, which I think is.
We talked about that circle that they would find those. So it was like they just picked a verse on each side of the circle.
Yeah. Except the visual I have when I think of the Israelites doing this is the kid on the merry-go-round who is a sign and he just hits his head on the sign every time he comes around. That's never learns the lesson.
It brought me back to when I was a kid and we did like Bible drill, Bible
Yeah.
Oh,
memorization.
Yeah.
And we would do, we're well, I think it's called Bible sword drilling or whatever here, but it was called Bible drill. And a lot of those verses were the ones where like scriptures back we would memorize. I was like, it really is like the best stuff. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. So you're saying if I were to do a Bible sword drill in here, you would win, you think? It's
Gosh, that was a long, long time ago. I can maybe look them up still.
what because on Saturday I watched them walk out of the room where we didn't see sword drill, but they walked out with the Bibles because they every time they do it, they get a brand new Bible
Yes.
because they want it to be the same. And so the first thing they do is they have to go through and break the spine and separate all the pages and yeah.
They would let us use our Bibles back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which was not really fair because some kids would.
Some kids
Marco?
Marco, yeah.
Yes, you could always tell. Like they wouldn't even look at it and flip open to the right page. And be like,
How many people?
Still litter.
yep.
How many people read through it by clicking the links, the verses in the app, and reading it in the app?
I did not realize until I was 3/4 the way through that you could do that.
That was my next question. How many didn't realize? So that's funny. Everybody that did was on this side of the room. There nobody on this side. So how many people flipped through and like that's what I did.
I took it because I wanted to read it out.
You did both.
Yeah.
I wanted it on
You
mine
did both?
because mine's EBS. I just want to read it out of mine versus.
Yeah, I didn't do it online initially because the only good option was King James version, and I wanted to read it in my translation. So then I was just irritated for a while because they didn't have ESV on there.
Well, and David said that it would like between the translations. It would
Oh yeah, like none of the other wouldn't work, right?
Yeah, they all wanted to go out to Bible. Yeah, they all wanted you to go out to the Bible app. Were there any that you felt strongly should be in there in that list that weren't?
I wondered why they only put Psalm 23:1.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, it's not a very long psalm. They could have put the whole thing.
Well, Psalms.
Because it's the verses, not chapters.
Yeah, and then
Psalms are under. look how
unrepresented on there.
Underrepresented. They
Yeah.
could have had more verses than they did.
Proverbs say, yeah, like read this and then any one of
read
these
5
in the
more.
next 20
Yeah.
chapters or something.
Yeah.
It's like, pick one.
I thought that was interesting as well. Were there any of them that you wondered why they were in there? Like why this one?
There were a lot of those.
Which one?
Well, I have to bring it up because I don't have them memorized.
You were so sure. I was like you're that confident. It's like,
Yeah, there's signs of Sadducees and 11. I was like,
well, there were a couple that I thought, why in the world? Then I realized I was reading the wrong one. So
oh my God. Once or
I
twice.
was in the wrong chapter. I was like, no, that's not. Oh yeah, that's why. Anybody learn anything? Any insights you gained either about the scripture or yourself?
Well, maybe, this is gonna sound wrong, but most of them I had read before.
Mhm.
They weren't like they were unknown to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I noticed a lot of them seemed familiar.
And that familiarity, that kind of comforted me. I thought, maybe you're not as, maybe you're a little bit better at this than you think you are. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I don't know that I could have told you. In the Bible, on some of the things, the Bible also can be very repetitive in some areas. Like love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind. That's in about 3 or 4 different places. So they picked this one too
Mm-hmm.
for that one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that part I thought was kind of neat. A few of them, like I said, the Psalms, especially Psalms, I just could the two that they picked was okay, but it was 2 verses. I'm like, well, you have this huge book, and you gave me 2 verses.
Yeah.
I know it was neat, because a lot of the Old Testament verses, there was a lot of prophecy about Christ. in them.
I noticed that too.
And it was kind of neat to watch those go boom, 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 because you're not reading 12 books at once usually, so you're a little more micro than macro there, and so watching that hit boom, boom, boom like that across several books was kind of neat.
I was stressed about it.
Amen.
You're stressed.
I'll get, I'll,
Because you're married to the teacher?
Yes.
You were stressed?
Well, the teacher was stressed about it. The teacher was stressed about it because I challenged everybody to do it, and then I realized I better get this thing done. So
Well, and I think you said at one point it was gonna take like 2 hours.
I was trying to.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I did it really fast, clicking on those.
Yeah, when you click through the verses, it's a lot faster. Yeah.
But I knew I was gonna be gone all day yesterday. So it was like I had to plan ahead to get this in. And then I'm leading a Bible study on Wednesday mornings. So I had to do that homework. So I was a little stressed about it. Like, oh, this is a lot to take in, right now.
For the record, I told her she didn't have to do it. Just saying.
But then you didn't say, I'm not gonna ask you.
She had 2 weeks.
I,
You didn't give it to me for like a little bit.
yeah, I also did say that, but I also didn't give her the link. She doesn't have the app on her phone. Just saying. But she didn't get the link for a week, so.
That's
Any-
the problem.
Like everybody else.
Anybody else have any thoughts or comments on it?
Preparing for tonight at restoration and going over trying to prepare everything for tonight and everything that I talked about. That's why I only got through the Old Testament because it was reading over and over, going back over each one and trying to break it down and look for hidden meanings and
Mm-hmm. Yep. A lot of foreshadowing. David mentioned the prophecy. The consistency is another thing. Because we don't typically look at the Bible from an overview. Like sometimes we get in the weeds, like way down deep in the weeds on Sunday morning. But we don't, and then people will talk about ideas or themes in the Bible, but we rarely do this kind of survey where we go all the way from Genesis to Revelation and look at little spots. And that's what struck me was the consistency across that. There's no and we know this, we talk about no contradiction in the Bible. The Bible doesn't undermine itself or change direction or, waver at all. But when you read it that way, that consistency kind of shows through, I think, especially when you can find, and I think this was one of his goals in picking the verses that he did, was to maybe kind of highlight that thread, through the Bible, and you see, hey, this is everywhere. And I don't know if you've ever heard, there's I can't remember where I first saw it, but it's a list of verses. There's one verse, basically a verse out of every book of the Bible that points to Jesus. And you can find in all 66 books of the Bible a verse or more that point to Jesus. And so it's kind of like that idea that it's there. You just have to look for it.
Sometimes they say it's the scarlet thread throughout the whole Bible.
Yes.
Jesus.
Yeah.
My issue with it was I would look at the verse, but then I would squirrel off. Oh, well, what's that? And so you have to read the chapter or two before or after to, instead of just that one verse.
And I didn't push it. I wanted everybody to dig in and read it first. But one of the other options that when when Matt was talking about it was to, he said read several verses on either side. So read these, then go back and read several verses on either side. He said, and then just go back and read the whole chapter, in each case. And it does, because you start to add context to those, and I think that's important.
That's why I like when you do the Bible project, it goes over and gives you the highlights of the book. When you're looking at
Yes.
this thing and it puts it in a historical thing. And it does a visual with sometimes the couple of them are a little off, but in general, it's a good tool. I really like that. When I was thinking about this, I thought, I need to really, I just find that helpful, even if you have, been in church a long time and you've read a lot and you feel like you know a lot, and you think, I need to be reminded what was going on right here, what was happening, why is this so important?
Yeah. Lots of good feedback, good thoughts. Anybody else? Sure. Okay. So a couple of things that jumped out at me. Specifically, I mentioned the kind of the threading of it and the consistency. Another one was Isaiah 53, specifically related. And I'd never noticed this. I've actually thought about this a lot, but in Isaiah 53, which is the prophecy, it's prophetic about Jesus. And what struck me about it was that it's past tense. Has anybody ever noticed that Isaiah 53 is talks about Jesus? It's a prophecy about Jesus, but in the past tense. Don't get excited because I don't have any answers. This is something that occurred to me, and this is one of those, like kind of like what Eric said and Michelle, what you said about like, oh, I got to go see this, squirrel that, because what's going on here, what's happening, and I've read it, I don't know how many times. This is one of Joy's CTS verses, right? Yeah. She has to she's memorized all of Isaiah 53 for CTS. And so I've heard it over and over and over again. But yeah, it's, has borne our griefs, carried our sorrows. We esteemed him stricken, smitten by God and afflicted. He was pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. And as you read through here, you see all of these references, but they're past tense, and I still don't know what to make of it. The only thing that I've come to so far is that from God's perspective, it's already happened.
Yeah.
God sees time as one.
The time thing is, it's hard to separate from him because it's all one continuum.
Yeah. And the fact to me, I may be drawing too much out of this, but to me, this is that validation that this is handed from God to Isaiah, because Isaiah is writing it. Isaiah is the one writing this down. And so, for him, it is future tense, but that's how I read it, as confirmation that this was handed from a different perspective to Isaiah, that this wasn't something he just dreamed up or necessarily had in a certain way, almost like he was writing down what God was narrating. And we don't necessarily believe that's how the Bible was given to them, but it doesn't ever say that God didn't do it that way in some cases. We know with Revelation that John was given a direct vision and like God, I see God, Jesus taking his arm, putting it around John and like, let me show you something, in that way. So.
Well, and I wondered when you mentioned that if it was like a dream, in that he thought he saw, you know what I mean?
He saw it happen and then wrote about it. Yeah.
So then it would be past tense, but I don't know. It doesn't say that he
Yeah.
had a dream.
So those are that's just one, a few examples of what comes from something like this. When you read, because again, I don't know that I would have, had I not been reading all of these verses talking about, it looked like, were prophecy and prophetic and thinking about the future. And then all of a sudden I hit these, this language that's past tense. for me, the favorite, the verse, there were verses that jumped out at me was Ephesians 2:8-10. And it says, "For by grace you are saved through faith. And that is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, not as a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." And this one, also the language kind of jumped out at me because we have this idea that we keep talking about, saved by grace through faith. That's our salvation. It's not by the works, and he specifically says why. So that it's not your own doing, so you can't boast. But then it turns around in verse 10 and specifically says, "Created in Christ Jesus for good works." So not saved by good works, but created for good works, which is that, just to me, is that marriage of faith and works that we read so much in the Bible, and how it's one doesn't works aren't what justifies us, but works are what show that we've been justified. And so one comes from that. So it encapsulated so much in that one small set of verses right there that, and for me, in all of my struggles through my life with my faith and just feeling like I wasn't, okay, I'm not really saved, or what have I missed, or why, did I not say the right thing or do the right thing, or whatever it was. And that these are verses that just hit right at the heart of that. So.
For me, one of my favorites anyway, was Ecclesiastes, where it's just simplified everything down. Said, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." And I thought, oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
That's nice and easy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was also a good one. I remember reading that one. One that I think, and this is only one that I've really come across and read in detail recently as I was reading, because I knew he would have John 3:16 in there. But the one that I thought should be added was John 3:36. And it says, because it expands on that, it kind of goes along with the Ephesians verse here. 3:36 says, "Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life, and whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God remains on him." And it distills it down just to that simple idea of belief, but it's tied to obedience as well, which is also throughout it. All right. Any other thoughts before I go on? Good job, everybody. I appreciate the participation. That was I'm pleased with the feedback. All right. So pivoting then, and we won't get through all of these, to kind of this next piece of discipleship. And this gets into the chapter in the book is called "The Distinguishing Marks of Disciples." So this is chapter 4, is where we're at now. And really, and I'll kind of go with what we've talked. So with everything we've discussed so far, if you were to say, if I saw this, pick one thing. If I saw this in somebody, I would consider them a disciple. How would you answer that? Just sits. How would you identify a disciple? One characteristic.
One characteristic, I think, is seeing people through love.
Okay.
I think you don't have love, and you're not really a disciple, and you only need that love when you have that relationship with Christ.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think it's, they can make other disciples.
Okay.
Some people could say, you know, the fruit of the Spirit.
Okay.
Just say they'll know them by their love or also
By their fruit. Yeah.
I think so.
That's why I think love is the key thing to it, because it's not love, it's just a noun. Love is not just a noun, it's a verb.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have that love, then you are going to make disciples. You see what I'm saying? If you don't have the love, I don't know how you can do all the other stuff that you need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
I do know it's kind of a difficult question, a dangerous question in some ways, because for us as humans, it's like being a judge for ice cream. It can be very subjective. And it'd be real easy for me to say, well, this person makes a good disciple, this person doesn't.
Yeah. It's not necessarily what I would argue is the answer specifically, but there's somewhat of a clue. Have they been transformed? That would be I would look at somebody and say, have they been transformed? Because to me, if you're a disciple, if you're a disciple of Jesus, Jesus has gotten a hold of you. Like you, because I think of just what we've talked about, what goes into that, like what the potential is, like what does it mean to pick up your cross daily and follow Christ? What I've been reading recently, and I almost mentioned this. I didn't want to derail things with you, Eric, at Restoration Life, but I almost said when you mentioned picking up your cross, that for many of us, picking up our cross really means putting something down.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's what is God telling you to lay down, which is the cross we bear.
I was waiting for you to say something because I could feel it from you. I was like, I wonder if he's going to say something.
Yeah.
This.
I just kept my mouth. I was like, no, I don't want to derail it. But because I think for a lot of the people there, that's an important point, is that because they're all trying to lay things down
Mm-hmm.
and let go of things. We need to love like you're talking about. That's not our nature. You have to be transformed. To love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, you have to be transformed. To have the fruit of the Spirit, you have to be transformed. And I think you can look at your life, and so we'll take it off of judging others, and look at our own lives, and say, have I been transformed? And I think of the quote from The Chosen where Mary Magdalene says, "I was one way, and then I met Jesus, and then I was another." Basically, she's not the same anymore, and I think that's what we should be able to strive for. And so that ties into this idea, is like, okay, so what are all of these things? And they're more verbose in the book. It's a funny word to mess up. More verbose in the book, but I distilled them down to transformed characteristics: mind, character, relationships, habits, service, and influence. And so we might get through a couple of these, but and we'll finish next week on whatever we don't get to. But in being called to discipleship and looking at what that means for us to live differently, which is the core of it, because everything we see in the Bible, everything about even the way it's described is the sin. First Adam brought sin, and the second Adam, Christ, redeemed it. So like it's even two different people. That's how disparate they are, and how different it is. And so we have to be transformed from one to the other. We have to deny ourselves. We have to, all of these things. But to get to these 6 characteristics, we say, okay, well then what are we transforming into? And this is where we come back to this whole core of be like Christ. That's what discipleship, being a disciple, is this continual journey to be like Christ and to make others who are also like Christ. So when we start talking about the different characteristics here, we think of all of these in terms of what was Jesus like, because that's how he talks about him in the book. But he starts in Romans 12:2, and which is very simple. It's be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's a dangerous conversation, because to think about, I was going to ask what is in our mind that needs to be transformed, and then I realized it's probably not a good question to ask people in a large group setting. So, does anyone have any safe examples of transformed things in our mind? What are the things that God needs to get a hold of and transform in us?
One thing I think of is lies that we tell ourselves. So, I'm not a good enough mom, or I don't know my Bible well enough, or I'm, whatever. And if those play over and over again, you're not transforming your mind. The devil has a hold on you, and you start to believe those things. So you have to hold on to what you know is true.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you start focusing, like take your thoughts captive, meditate on these verses to change that rhetoric, or it doesn't get better.
So lies we tell ourselves. I think it's a great example. Any others?
Well, to me, it's also, it's not just a one-time transformation. It's a renewing. I mean, the same thing in the military. They realize that, just because you've been taught once how to do something, it doesn't mean that you're going to remember it forever.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to renew it.
Yeah.
So it's not just a one-time transformation. Okay, I'm good to go. I got my wings in the Army. They said, yeah, you fly a helicopter, you're your wings. That doesn't mean I'm going to be able to fly forever.
Yeah.
There was, I had to renew, I had to study, I had to research, I had to practice, I had to work at it, all those things tied in together. And so that verse to me was, not just do it one time, but we would have to renew it now and then, because it's easy to get in habits. We all like our safe habits we get in, and then those become traditions, and then those become our foundation for our belief.
Yep.
It's like a focus, your mind's always on something. So what's it on? What is it what are you focused on? So transformation of a mind to me is a change of direction, okay, I'm no longer focused on what my own self or my own needs or whatever. You're focusing on, what God wants for you. And so to me, it's a focus thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what does a transformer do? What does a transformer, no.
Brad's down. He said more than meets the eye. He's like,
what does a transformer do?
it changes. Yeah, it changes.
We get the word, and we use it in other things, it's changing. But it's a change. When you have a transformation, it's noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, like what Katie was talking about, it may be internal. But again, this is the counseling part of you, but when we have internal changes and our thoughts changes, our behaviors change.
Yeah.
They change as a result of that. And our emotions change. I mean, that's what CBT is all about. And that's why I don't, some people view counseling as, I don't know what your bad experience was this last week, but on that, but to me.
All good things, Wendy. All good things.
To me, that part of why I like CBT is because I feel like it's very scriptural.
Mm-hmm.
There are scriptures that I'm like, that's CBT right there. The scripture came first, mind you. I'm not saying that. I just meant, it's like this has this influence in it, and you can see it.
Almost like God knows how this stuff works. And...
And so when you see that transformation, I can see that transformation in people who are not necessarily Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see some things transform in them. How much more magnified should that be if it is of God?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a key point in what you're talking about too, is even because you're using an example from therapy, which could be Christian, non-Christian, believers or whatever. But the idea, if and please correct me if I misunderstand, is you help people change the way they think with the intent that it's going to change their behavior. And it's not, and you can't really tell inside someone, you never know if they're really changing unless you see a change in behavior. Now there could be a disconnect there. Like our kids can obey us, but hate our guts, and think, and then when they get teenagers, they just hate everything. So, not that I'm going through that right now, but there can be a disconnect, but you can't have, if you have a changed mind, you have changed behavior, generally speaking. And Jesus calls that out. It's he says in multiple places, he says, by our actions, we'll get to this in a minute with, I think it's character, but in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, he says, and these are the things that come as a result of a changed mind. He says in verses 13 through 16, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Now, the ultimate goal of this is for them to see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven, but it's the deeds that they're seeing. They're not seeing your happy thoughts. They're not seeing your happy place or whatever it is that's going on in your head that's changed. That change, it ties, and for me, it ties to the idea of faith and works. My faith, the more faith that I have, eventually I can't contain it, and it's going to come out, and that comes out in good works. And so we look around and we see it, are people transformed, and we say, but here's the other side effect. It talks about the salt, and he talks about the light, and these characteristics. What do those things do? It's not just something you see in that person. There's an effect from it. What else do those things affect?
Light exposes.
Whatever it comes in contact with.
The world around it. You put salt in food, and it makes the food salty. It adds flavor and character. The light lights the whole. It's one of my favorite illustrations. Is that all the darkness in the universe cannot hold back a single point of light. Light overcomes darkness every time. It's impossible for darkness to overcome light, and that's the idea here. If you're transformed and you're letting that light shine, then it's going to be evident in the world around you. Other people will be able to see better, and they will be able to find their way. You're going to have to speak up.
Who does the transforming?
Who does the transforming? Brad asks, who does the transforming?
That's not a man's job. That's God and the Holy Spirit.
And I think that's the key, because I was thinking of this sort of, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things have passed away, behold, all things become new. The next verse is really important. For all things are of God, who has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ. So the idea of being transformed, desires, actions, and things is rooted in the work of God, not our own words, is what I'm trying to say. Because I think sometimes if we get so focused on, I gotta do my deeds right, and I have to have strong enough faith, and all of these things, that can kind of become works based, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense or not.
And going with that, back to what you asked earlier, what we thought was missing in some of those verses, or what we thought should have been in there, was Genesis. That's what I was expecting to be first in there. In the beginning, the Word was God. God was the Word. That's where it begins.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, from the very beginning.
Yeah. That wasn't one of the verses.
Even with the transformation, without God and putting that transformation, that person that does the therapy or trying to help others, they got that from somewhere. And that's from the beginning.
Yes.
I think one of the things going along with what Brad was saying, it has to be of God. Because otherwise, we can all each day sit here, okay, I'm going to do this today, and I'm going to be friendly, or I'm going to show somebody love. But for it to be lasting, the only way, it can't be by our own doing. And it's kind of like you go through a butterfly. It goes through all the stages, but the majority of that change is completely hidden when it's, in its cocoon.
Yeah.
And until it comes out, you see, the beautiful effects of it. But for it to be lasting, it has to come, the only way it can come is from God. Otherwise, if we try it, it's gonna fail every time. You might be able to keep it up and keep a change up for a few days, a few weeks, but then you're gonna immediately end up at some point going right back to where you were.
Right. Yeah. No, it's good. I chuckle because I thought of an illustration in that God can take a caterpillar, turn it into a liquid,
Yes.
and then get a butterfly.
Get a butterfly.
No matter how many caterpillars we put in a blender, we'll never get a butterfly. You never get a butterfly, and that's the difference between when God gets a hold of us. So anyway, moving on. I have put a sum total of 0 caterpillars in a blender.
It's actually the root word for new creation.
Metamorphosis, yeah, which is really a good example too.
Literally.
I think sometimes as Christians,
Documentaries about that.
we know it's from God, but we can become impatient because we think then it should be immediate. Like we shouldn't struggle anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I should automatically want to read my Bible every day, but it's still going to be a struggle.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that it's just instantly gone or that
Yeah.
sinful nature is gone. We still have that. So I think that's where I think that's where we run into, well, maybe I really wasn't saved.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe he's not doing that for me, because we're waiting on him. But I think too, he has steps to take us through.
Yeah.
And we have to be obedient.
And I think what's dangerous is whenever we try to decide what the steps are for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we get in trouble.
Right.
And sometimes it's just our limited abilities. I mean, sometimes we don't think we have limited abilities. I mean, we think, oh, I see this very clearly and I can help this person, this.
Right.
That's not, unless God is calling you, and I do believe that God uses people sometimes in that way. There's been people in my life that I think helped me through a time and helps me to see something clear. But they weren't coming from it from an all-knowing
Mm-hmm.
point. It goes back to the
Yeah.
other, for me, they were coming to it from a love point and like, had you ever thought, maybe, it wasn't
Right.
like when you.
Yeah.
you know,
There's
this.
so there's a number of things at play here, and we could we quite literally could spend hours discussing this. You might not, I could, but um, you you mentioned something there that really kind of resonated for me, and that's this idea of calling, like what we can't change the person. I think is how I want to say it. And Paul says in his First Corinthians, that some sow, some water, but God gives the increase. And when we try to change people, we try to meddle in God's place and be the one that gives. We're trying to give the or force the increase, and which then back to the earlier illustration is I put in the category of us trying to throw caterpillars in a blender to get a butterfly. Like that's not what we can do. We can feed that caterpillar, we can care for that caterpillar, but ultimately whether it becomes a butterfly is out of our hands. And I think that's at least that's what I'm hearing what you're describing, and I think that's a significant point for us because it frees us from this burden of like I haven't saved enough people, just that kind of mentality. I don't know how many if people ever worry about that, but just the thought that have I done enough for God? Well, have you been obedient? Like ever? Like that's like let's start there, and because those are the conversations that I have to have with myself. And the idea of obedience. This is the last point, and we just only got through one of these. But the last point that I want to hit on, it's been an amazing conversation. I've loved this. Um, is that in a transformed mind, faith means doing the will of the Father. And in Matthew 7, toward the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and this is so many things this ties into here because Katie and I have discussed this. Like, how does this? It's Matthew 7:21 through 23. And it plays into the how do I, how do I know I'm saved, or how does this apply? What about all those people who are going to stand before Jesus and he's going to say, I don't know you? That's this verse. It says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Okay, so we get that, but then it says, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. And that seems like such a harsh, stark statement in light of people who are prophesying and driving out demons and performing miracles. But the truth of that is, none of that was in obedience, because he says, only he who does the will of my Father. So if you're obedient, that's the criteria. It doesn't matter what you're doing if it's not in obedience to the Father. It doesn't matter. Again, back to the works have no bearing. You can do all the works in the world, all the miracles, all the wonderful things. You can stop wars and create peace and do all of these things, but it doesn't matter if it's not in obedience. And that is another characteristic of a transformed mind, I think, is obedience to the will of God. And again, back to obedience in picking up that cross and being willing to carry that cross and put down the things that are keeping you from picking up the cross. And if we're willing to do that, I think we can confidently say for ourselves that we're being transformed. And I agree. I don't think it's a once and done thing. It's something we live out every day, because it's why Jesus says daily pick up your cross. Any other thoughts?
You even said something at the beginning, like on that, Eric was talking about, that hit me, said, what do you have to lay down, on there? And what hit me is, the majority of, you can only carry one thing at a time, and so what is it you're willing to carry, that mile today, on there, is it the heavy burden that you put on yourself, or Because God's
Yeah.
cross.
Because those things get in the way. They do. It's a good point. Anybody else? Great discussion. Great discussion. Okay. I promised another challenge. So, and you only have a week this time. So, I want you to pick, I should have put rules around this, a verse out of the list. I'll do that because that'll keep somebody from picking Jesus wept.
There's a lot.
I know you people.
Yes, that's
To the CI.
There.
There's a lot more powerful.
You want
than
us to
people give it
memorize
credit
it?
for.
I'm gonna. I want everyone to pick a verse off the list and memorize it. You got 1 week.
Okay, you want us to memorize one we haven't already memorized.
No.
I'm just telling you, because
Yes.
we're all gonna come back with John.
I know. It was and that was the best I could do was put.
So what would you say John 3:16 now?
Yeah, we could take John. I'll allow that. We'll take John 3:16 out of the list.
Wait, let's not get that out on the internet. We are taking John 3:16 out of the Bible.
I said off
So,
the list, not out of the Bible. Yes, thank you for the clarification. So next week I want everyone to memorize a verse. You can be an overachiever and memorize more than one. It's fine.
But you really
A
want us
verse.
to do a new one that we didn't know before.
It would be nice if you did a new one.
I'm saying that because
I am not going to ask you if that was one you already had memorized.
Several years
You
ago.
will
How
live-
can I remember all
The Lord
of
is
them?
my shepherd.
You will live with your own. You will live with your own untransformed conscience.
I sleep with the fan on.
Oh my! I feel like we need to go back a few weeks and revisit the hell conversations. Okay, before we get any further off the rails, any last comments or thoughts? All right, let's close in prayer.